Who gave you the keys to this building, boy? The voice didn't just break the silence, it shattered the sanctity of the quantum computing lab like a brick through a stained glass window. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of hour where the only things awake are ambition and insomnia. Marcus froze. The soldering iron in his hand hovered millimeters above the delicate silicon wafer that represented 3 years of sleepless nights and relentless grinding. He wasn't just a student here, he was the lead researcher on the Department of Defense grant project, a ghost in plain sight moving through hallways built by men who never imagined someone like him would own the keys. But right now, the logic of his credentials didn't matter. The hum of the server racks, usually a comforting lullaby of data and progress, suddenly sounded like a countdown. Marcus slowly placed the iron in its holster, the metallic click echoing loudly in the cavernous room. He didn't turn around immediately. He took a breath, a deep, steadying inhale of ozone and stale coffee, because he knew the script. He had rehearsed this interaction in his head 1,000 times, hoping he'd never have to perform it. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands, palms open, fingers splayed to show he held nothing but the invisible weight of his own brilliance. "I am a doctoral candidate," Marcus said, his voice steady but low, vibrating with a controlled rage, "and my ID is on the desk to my left." He turned to face the intrusion. 2 campus police officers stood in the doorway, hands resting aggressively on their holsters, their silhouettes cutting into the blue light of the lab. They weren't looking at the equations on the board. They weren't looking at the prototype that could revolutionize data encryption. They were looking at a threat. Standards must be maintained, they would say later. But in that moment, the only standard being maintained was prejudice.
"I said get on the ground, now!" The flashlight beam hit Marcus's eyes like a physical blow, blinding him, disorienting him, stripping away his vision just as they intended to strip away his dignity. It wasn't enough that he had identified himself. It wasn't enough that his picture was on the university website under Rising Stars in Engineering. To Officer Bragg, a man whose authority hung loosely on his frame like an ill-fitting suit, Marcus was just a body in a room where bodies like his weren't supposed to be after dark. "I have identification," Marcus repeated, the words tasting like ash. He moved his hand slowly toward the lanyard on the desk, a movement of pure compliance interpreted through the lens of fear as an act of aggression. "He's reaching!" the second officer screamed, his voice cracking with a mix of adrenaline and incompetence. The air in the room shifted instantly. The intellectual atmosphere evaporated, replaced by the primal, metallic scent of impending violence. Marcus felt the cold rush of fear, not for his life, but for his work. If they tackled him, if they knocked over the prototype, 3 years would vanish. "Don't touch the equipment!" Marcus shouted, an instinctual plea for the science, which Bragg heard as defiance. They didn't see a scientist protecting his life's work. They saw a suspect resisting control. The space between them collapsed. Heavy boots stomped across the anti-static mats, desecrating the cleanroom environment. This is how it happens, Marcus thought, time slowing down to a crawl. You do everything right. You get the grades, you get the grants, you follow the rules, and still, you end up with a knee in your back. The ghost in plain sight was about to become a statistic. "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" The mantra of the oppressor echoed off the acoustic tiles. Marcus wasn't resisting. He was limp, his cheek pressed hard against the cold, waxed linoleum that smelled of lemon polish and hypocrisy. He could see dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam that now lay sideways on the floor. He felt the heavy weight of Officer Bragg on his spine, compressing his lungs, making every breath a battle. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into his wrists, a sharp pinching pain that signaled the end of his autonomy. Click, click, click. The sound was final. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on his future. "You're making a big mistake," Marcus whispered, the vibration traveling through the floor. "Shut up," Bragg grunted, yanking Marcus up by the cuffs, sending a searing line of fire through his shoulders. They dragged him out, not like a scholar, but like refuse. As they passed the whiteboard, Marcus caught a glimpse of his final equation. It was unsolved, just like the equation of justice in this institution. Numbers don't lie, son. People do. And right now, the lie was walking him out the door. The shame wasn't his, but he was forced to carry it. He was being marched out of the kingdom he had helped build, dethroned by men who couldn't even spell the variables he worked with. The irony was suffocating. Walk faster. The command echoed down the long, sterile corridor of the engineering wing. This was the walk of shame, designed to maximize humiliation even when there was no audience. But there was an audience. The security cameras, silent observers with unblinking glass eyes, recorded every frame of the travesty. Marcus looked up at the lens as he was shoved forward. He knew the server loop schedule. He knew that footage would be overwritten in 48 hours unless flagged. He had to remember the timestamp, 2:22 a.m. He locked it in his mind, filing it away in the same cabinet where he stored constants and variables. His shoulder throbbed, his wrists burned, but his mind was already working on the defense, calculating the trajectory of the lawsuit like a physics problem. They thought they had broken him, but they had only activated him. "You guys have no idea who I am," Marcus said, his voice calm, terrifyingly calm. "I don't care who you are," Bragg sneered, pushing him through the double doors and into the cool night air. The campus was asleep, indifferent to the violation occurring on its concrete paths. The stars looked down, cold and distant. This is the reality of the Black academic experience. You are a genius until the sun goes down, and then you are just a suspect, a ghost in plain sight.
"Get in." The hand on his head was patronizing, guiding him into the back of the cruiser like a dangerous animal being crated. The back seat was hard plastic, designed to be uncomfortable, designed to remind you that you are property of the state. The smell of stale vomit and industrial cleaner assaulted his senses. The cage, that's what it was. A cage separating the civilized world in the front seat from the savage world in the back. Marcus leaned his head against the plexiglass, the vibrations of the engine idling, rattling his teeth. He watched the familiar buildings of the campus roll by. The library where he studied until dawn, the student union where he mentored freshmen, the statue of the founder who owned slaves. It all looked different from behind the glass. It looked like a set piece in a play he was no longer starring in. Officer Bragg laughed in the front seat, a casual, cruel sound, joking with his partner about overtime pay. They were discussing what they would buy with the money earned for ruining his life. The banality of evil wasn't a monster. It was two guys talking about pizza while destroying a man's future. Standards must be maintained, and the standard here was control. Marcus closed his eyes and began to count. Not sheep. He counted the policy violations. Unlawful detainment, excessive force, failure to verify ID. Each one was a bullet in the gun he would fire later.
Empty your pockets. Everything on the counter. The dehumanization process is systematic. It is designed to strip away the layers of identity until only the physical shell remains. Off came the belt. Out came the shoelaces. The watch that his grandfather gave him for graduation, taken. The wallet containing his Mensa card, tossed carelessly into a gray plastic bin. And finally, the university ID, the card that proved he belonged. The officer didn't even look at it. He just threw it in the pile, face down. Symbolism so heavy it felt scripted. "Name," the booking officer asked, bored, typing on a keyboard that had seen too much misery. "Marcus Thorne, PhD candidate, Department of Electrical Engineering." Marcus enunciated every syllable. The officer stopped typing and looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "We'll just put student for now, if you even are one." The dismissal was total. In this room, credentials meant nothing. Intellect meant nothing. Only the color of your skin and the cuffs on your wrists told the story they wanted to hear. Marcus stood in his socks on the cold tile, feeling the chill seep into his bones. They were trying to make him feel small, but they forgot that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. And they were transferring a massive amount of kinetic energy directly into his resolve. Lights out. The heavy steel door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in Marcus's chest. He was alone. The holding cell was a box of concrete and misery, a far cry from the sleek, climate-controlled lab he had been dragged from. He sat on the metal bench, the cold seeping through his jeans. It was 3:45 a.m. His presentation to the grant committee, the one that would determine the funding for the next 2 years, was at 8 a.m. He had the slides on a USB drive in his pocket. No, the drive was in the plastic bin outside. He was going to miss it. The realization hit him harder than the tackle. Everything he had worked for, every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every lonely night, was dissolving because a man with a badge and an insecurity complex decided he didn't belong. He closed his eyes and tried to visualize the slides. Slide 1, quantum entanglement in silicon substrates. Slide 2, error correction protocols. He recited the speech in his head, whispering the words to the graffiti-stained walls. The data suggests, he whispered, his voice cracking. The data suggests that the system is flawed. Tears stung his eyes, hot and angry. Not tears of sadness, but of frustration. He was a genius in a cage, a ghost in plain sight, haunting a cell instead of a lecture hall.
You're free to go, pending investigation. The words were spoken with zero apology. The morning shift officer handed him the plastic bag with his life inside. Marcus fumbled with the shoelaces, his fingers stiff and clumsy. He shoved his belt through the loops, not caring that he missed one. He grabbed his watch. 10:15 a.m. The presentation was over. The committee had met, deliberated, and left. He had been marked as a no-show. In the academic world, that was a death sentence. Unprofessional, unreliable. He walked out of the station into the blinding morning sun. The world had kept turning while he was frozen in the amber of the legal system. Students were walking to class, laughing, drinking lattes, worrying about trivial quizzes. They existed in a different universe. Marcus felt like he was walking on a different frequency. He pulled his phone out. 15 missed calls, 4 from his advisor, 2 from the dean, 9 from his mother. He didn't call anyone back, not yet. He stood on the precinct steps and took a photo of the building. Then he took a photo of himself, disheveled, exhausted, broken. Evidence. Numbers don't lie, son. And the timestamp on this photo was going to be Exhibit A.
We have to suspend your lab access, Mr. Thorne. Dean Sterling didn't even have the decency to look Marcus in the eye. He was focused on a spot on his desk, perhaps a scratch in the mahogany, avoiding the uncomfortable reality of the young man sitting before him. It's standard protocol when a student is involved in a police incident. We can't have unpredictability in a secure facility. The words were like poison wrapped in silk. Unpredictability? Marcus asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. I was working. I was where I was supposed to be. I was assaulted by your employees. Sterling sighed, a sound of patronizing exhaustion. The police report says you were combative. It says you refused to identify yourself. Now, I know there are 2 sides to every story, but until this is cleared up, standards must be maintained. You understand. Marcus stared at the suspension notice. It was a template. They hadn't even written a new letter for him. They just filled in the blanks. Combative. The word hung in the air. A code word. A dog whistle. I understand perfectly, Dean, Marcus said, standing up slowly. You're protecting the institution, not the truth. But you forget one thing. I'm an engineer. I fix broken systems. And this one? It's about to get overhauled. This is the fallout. The email hit his inbox like a bomb. The dominoes were falling exactly as the system intended. First the arrest, then the suspension, and now the funding. Without the scholarship, he couldn't afford tuition. Without tuition, he lost his visa to the lab. Without the lab, he lost his career. It was a precision strike on his existence. Marcus sat in the dim light of his dorm room, the glow of the screen illuminating the despair on his face. He felt the weight of history pressing down on him. How many brilliant minds had been extinguished just like this, snuffed out not by a lack of talent, but by a surplus of bureaucracy and bias. He looked at the bank account balance, $42.18. He couldn't afford a lawyer. He couldn't afford to fight, but he couldn't afford to surrender. He remembered his grandfather's voice. If you can't go through the door, go through the wall. He picked up the phone. He didn't call his mom, He called the number on a business card he had kept from a guest lecture 2 years ago, a civil rights attorney who specialized in institutional accountability. It was a long shot, but ghosts in plain sight know how to move through walls.
"They took your phone?" Attorney Reynolds asked, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "No, they took my dignity. The phone was just collateral." Marcus laid it all out. The timeline, the witnesses, the camera locations. He spoke with the precision of a scientist, stripping away the emotion to present the raw data of injustice. Reynolds listened, her eyes narrowing. She saw what the dean didn't. She didn't see a combative student. She saw a winning lottery ticket. She saw a precedent-setting case. "You know what the problem is, Marcus?" she said, standing up and walking to the window overlooking the city. "They think you're just another kid who slipped through the cracks. They don't realize you kept the receipts." She turned back, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. "We don't just want your scholarship back. We want the dean's resignation. We want the policy rewritten. We want to burn the old standard to the ground and build a new one with their money. Are you ready for war? Because justice isn't given, it's taken, and we are about to take everything."
Discovery is a beautiful thing. The university fought it. They claimed the footage was corrupted. They claimed the logs were lost. But Marcus knew the system better than they did. He knew that the backup servers mirrored data to an off-site cloud storage at 3 a.m. every night. The footage of his arrest had been uploaded before they could delete it. Reynolds filed the motion to compel. The judge granted it, and there it was, the smoking gun, the digital ghost that refused to die. They watched the video in silence in Reynolds' office. It was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. "I am a doctoral candidate," Marcus's voice rang out from the speakers, calm and steady. Then the aggression from Bragg, the lack of provocation, the immediate escalation. It contradicted every single word in the police report. The lie was exposed. Numbers don't lie, son. Pixels don't lie. Timestamps don't lie. People do. And now, the people who lied were about to face the numbers.
This hearing is now in session. The University Disciplinary Council was a kangaroo court designed to protect the university's image. Dean Sterling looked bored, checking his watch. Officer Bragg looked defiant, chewing gum. They expected Marcus to beg. They expected a plea for leniency. "Mr. Thorne," the head of the council began, adjusting his spectacles, "we are here to review your conduct violation. Violence against a campus officer is a zero-tolerance offense." Reynolds didn't even look up from her files. She just slid a single flash drive across the polished table. It spun and came to a stop directly in front of the dean. "Before we proceed," Reynolds said, her voice ice-cold, "I'd like to submit into evidence Defense Exhibit A, and I'd like to remind Officer Bragg that perjury is a felony, even in a university hearing." The air left the room. The smugness on Sterling's face faltered for a microsecond. They realized, too late, that they weren't the hunters anymore. They were the prey.
"Play it again." The council head's voice was shaky. On the screen, the brutal reality of the night played out. The flashlight, the shove, the calm compliance of Marcus contrasted with the rabid aggression of the officers. The report lay on the table. Subject lunged at officer. The video showed Marcus with his hands in the air. The report, subject had no ID. The video showed Marcus pointing to the ID. It was a massacre of credibility. "This report," Reynolds said, picking up the police statement as if it were contaminated waste, "is a work of fiction, a bad one. And Dean Sterling, you signed off on the suspension based on this fiction without a shred of due process. You failed your student, you failed your institution, and you failed the standards you claim to maintain." Sterling was pale. Bragg had stopped chewing his gum. The ghost in plain sight had materialized, and he was 10 feet tall. Marcus looked at Sterling. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just watched the power dynamic shift, the gravity of the room tilting toward the truth.
"The settlement is substantial, but it wasn't about the money. The money was just the penalty tax the university paid for its arrogance. The real victory was in the headlines. Officer Bragg, fired. Dean Sterling, resigned to pursue other opportunities. The suspension, expunged. The scholarship, reinstated with a 200% increase. The system had tried to crush a diamond, and all they did was polish it. Marcus sat in the conference room, the settlement check sitting on the table. He looked at it. It was enough to fund his research for a decade. It was enough to change his family's life. But he was thinking about the next kid, the one who wouldn't have the presence of mind to check the timestamp, the one who wouldn't know about the server backups. "We're not done," Marcus said to Reynolds. "This money starts a legal defense fund for students. We fix the system or we bankrupt it. Standards must be maintained." And he was setting a new standard.
I'm back. The lab was quiet again. The hum of the servers was the same, but the air felt different. It was lighter. The ghost was gone. The man remained. Marcus picked up the prototype. It was finished. The interruption hadn't stopped him. It had fueled him. He had engineered a solution to a problem no one wanted to admit existed. He placed the chip into the reader. The screen lit up. System optimized. He leaned back in his chair, the blue light reflecting in his glasses. They tried to lock him out, but he owned the keys now. He owned the building. He owned the narrative. He looked directly at you, the viewer, his eyes piercing through the screen. They will try to stop you. They will try to silence you. They will try to bury you, but they don't know that you are a seed. He leaned forward, the intensity dialed to 11. Keep your receipts, know your rights, and never, ever let them see you bleed. Subscribe to Silent Genius Stories, because justice isn't given, it's taken.